Excellency S.Skandakumar, our chief guest today, the High Commissioner of Sri Lanka, an excellent introduction. I need not say anything further when I call upon His Excellency Mr. S.Skandakumar.
Honourable members of Parliament, Your Worship the Mayor and very distinguished guests at the head table, President and members of the Committee of the Tamil Senior Citizens Association of New South Wales. On behalf of my colleague, Lal Vikramatunga, I'd like to thank you, sir, the President and his committee, for the kind invitation extended to me and Lal to be here this morning to be part of a very prestigious celebration revolving around 25 years of yeoman service, not just amongst your own members, but even beyond, through your generosity, your compassion, and your love, and therefore a landmark worth celebrating. I do not wish to add to the accolades that have already been paid to you. The very presence of these very distinguished officials representing the Parliament of New South Wales and the Worship himself is an indication of the esteem in which the association is held. And for that reason, it is a singular pleasure and an honour for me and Mr. Vikramatunga to be with you today. And once again, thank you, sir, for the invitation. Listening to that beautiful rendering of the blessing of the Tamil language, as it were, reminded me of my early days in Colombo 4. I don't know how many of you lived in Colombo. And as a young student, I was passionately fond of Tamil films. And whenever I was able to collect 1 rupee and 10 cents, I would then walk down to the Plaza Theatre, which was very famous for the Indian Tamil films, as it were, and sneak into the second class and watch whatever films I could. And today I was reminded of one particular film that I saw. Its name was Thiruvilayadal. And in that, Sundaram Bal rendered a beautiful song, 2 lines of which came back to my mind, and I hope I repeat them as they were sung. The first was, it went like this: Ya Marinda Molihalile, Tamil Moli Pol Inidanadu Engum Kano. And the second was, Yam Aninda Pulavarhalile, Kambanai Pol, Valluvar Pol, Ilangove Pol, Pumidanil Yanganum Purandadillai. And when you look back on those words and see what poet Bharati had in mind when he said that, and it was so beautifully sung by Sundaram Bal, today you have every reason to be proud, as I am, to be who we are. And so once again, thank you for inviting us. Mr. President, you touched on issues that are as close to my heart as it is to the Consul General. Neither of us are career diplomats. We are here with a purpose. It is not the prestige of the position that makes us what we are here today. It is the sense of duty, because we have lived through all that you have experienced throughout your life, some of which were the ones that made you come out seeking greener pastures in a country away from your country of birth. We've seen through the 56 language issue. We were there for the 58 riots. We saw the southern insurrection of the youth in the early 70s. We were there for the second insurrection in the north, again of the youth, as it were. It was unfortunate that governments of that time failed to address the needs of the youth, as it were, because most countries regard the youth as their future generation. We looked at it differently. And then it all escalated through the horrendous incidents of 83 July, from which we never really got back. And that was followed by a brutal 27-year conflict, and that conflict has left behind scars on both sides of the divide that are going to take more than a lifetime to heal. So it is for that reason that if the progress of reconciliation and peace has taken a little longer than what His Excellency the President would have desired when he took office in January of last year, It is these sensitivities that are holding back what he would ideally like to achieve in a much quicker space of time. It was only in 2008 that the indigenous people of Australia were rendered an apology by the government of Australia under Prime Minister Kevin Rudd's time. And you only have to read the text of that apology to be able to understand the extent of the remorse. Notwithstanding that, 8 years have gone by, and I don't think any of these distinguished members would honestly say that all those problems have been resolved. And it is for that reason that I appeal to you for a little more patience, because when His Excellency took office on the 9th of January 2015 as President, the first thing he did, which I doubt any other head of state has ever done, was to dilute voluntarily his executive powers, because he wanted to make himself accountable both to Parliament and to his people. He then went on in his address to the nation that this day forward, each one of us is a Sri Lankan first, and then we will respect each other's ethnicities. And when he made that statement, my mind went back to the day that Lee Kuan Yew spoke to the Singaporean people when they were granted independence in 1965. This is what he said. He said, "Today we have the right of self-rule. You are free to speak in Mandarin, in Tamil, in English, or in Malay, but never forget that you are first a Singaporean." And that is exactly the sentiments that His Excellency, the President Maithripala Sirisena, echoed, unfortunately, 67 years after independence, whereas Lee Kuan Yew said it on the very day of independence. And don't forget that he looked to Ceylon, as it were, as a model for his own country, and look at Singapore's progress in the next 50 years and relate that to ours. And I don't think I need to say more. So, ladies and gentlemen, in demonstration of his commitment to that genuine process for peace and reconciliation, on the 4th of February last year, His Excellency the President moved a declaration of peace, where respect was paid to every life that was lost, both in the conflict and in violence since independence. He then moved amendments to ensure the independence of the judiciary, the public service, and the police, so that there would be an arm's length relationship between the executive and those very vital institutions. He appointed a constitutional council to make sure that the appointments were fair, just, and credible. And then with the Prime Minister, he moved a national unity government between the two major parties in our country, and the leader of opposition became the head of the Tamil National Alliance. So there is participation in the decision-making process. Time went by, and then he moved the Right to Information Bill, which was carried in Parliament, and most recently, it was the right to set up an office for missing persons. In addition to that, a former president of our country, the Chandrika Tunga, heads a secretariat for peace and reconciliation. So, ladies and gentlemen, all I'm trying to tell you is that every step has been taken by His Excellency the President. I grant that there has been the speed of achievement in relation to the commitments made has been slower than we would have liked, slower than what he would have liked. But there are reasons for that, because it is only between January of last year and August of today that all these positive steps have been taken. Sometimes we have a tendency to reflect on the time that the conflict ended in 2009 and expect the progress and relate the progress since then. But the genuine commitment to peace and reconciliation was made only in January of last year. And we all know that the path to that reconciliation is not an easy one, because for reasons I've already told you, there are scars on both sides of the divide that are probably never going to heal, some of them, because so brutal have been the experiences and so traumatic has been what has transpired. So we need to be a little more patient. But what you can be assured of is the sincerity of this government to move towards that objective. And for that, I would ask you both for your patience and assistance, because the role that you can play is to spread that word of togetherness, that we are no longer, we are all people with Sri Lankan heritage. Admittedly, you have now come to this beautiful country of Australia. You know what multicultural harmony can do for the well-being of a country. There's no finer example of that than Australia itself. And I know that you still love your country of birth, no matter what your experiences have been. And to that commitment, I hope that you will spread this word in your work that you're already doing, expand it, so that near 200,000 Sri Lankans who are living now in Australia can also come together to support the government in what they have committed themselves to and the noble objectives of peace for all. We are predominantly a Buddhist country, and we grant that. And it was 2,600 years ago where Lord Buddha preached, and the concluding line in every one of his sermons was the Sanskrit Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, which actually meant, may all beings be happy. And 2,600 years later, we ask ourselves the question, to what extent have those noble words actually been followed? Education gives us knowledge, but it must not be confined to knowledge alone. It must also give us wisdom. The wisdom to realize that none of us have a choice over how we come into this world. The wisdom to realize that when God calls time on our lives, we will live it only with our conscience. So we come in as equals and we leave it as equals. And why is it that we choose to treat the interim unequally? We all live our lives hoping that we can rest in peace. And I ask myself the question, why in heaven's name don't we use our resources to live in peace? And these are some of the questions I'm not posing to you, because I know that you have been discriminated against, and that's why you came out here. But I ask this question of everyone I meet, that why don't we show more love, more compassion to each other, knowing, to quote Warren Buffett, the American billionaire, birth is an ovarian lottery. And that basically means that some of us are born into circumstances much more fortunate than others. But that on the lottery winners an overwhelming responsibility to share that relative well-being with people less fortunate than themselves. So much so that the only time that any one of us will look down on a fellow human being would be when we give him our hand to raise him up. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for this invitation. And I feel honored to be here, given all that you have achieved over the 25 years. And much as language divided us in 1956, may I ask that we adopt a new language collectively, based on what you have already contributed, the language of compassion. Because that is the language, as Mark Twain once said, that helps the blind to see and the deaf to hear. Thank you, and may God bless you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I'm sure you would all agree that we understand now why he has been appointed the High Commissioner for Sri Lanka. With